We are having a public debt question conversation this morning into this hour, and our guests are already here. We will be talking this morning with Samuel Kiautha. I'm sorry if I butcher your name. Kiautha, right? A public finance and management expert. Samuel, good morning. Also talking with Joshua Muteti, who is a political economist and faith leader. And we're looking at sustainable public financing in Kenya or in Africa, and tackling debt challenges and its impact on citizens. It's a plethora of issues all wrapped into one, but we want to say welcome to you this morning and thank you for being part of Kenya's biggest conversation today. Karibu sana.
Asante.
Our conversation this morning is around sustainable public financing, but we want to welcome you to the Situation Room this morning. CT has proverbs this week from Angola. You can tell us what you think about them, think about this particular proverb, and how you would this would mean to you. Yes.
All right. Proverbs for the whole of this week ending tomorrow are from the Republic of Angola. If the pocket is empty, the judge is deaf.
This is great because we're talking to finance people, and we don't like empty pockets. But okay, Joshua,
yes.
We start with you.
Yeah.
How would you interpret this?
If the pocket is empty, the judge is deaf.
Yes.
Wow, I'm trying to wrap my thoughts. Does that mean that if you put your money where your mouth is, or something of the sort, and also at the same time, how it speaks to how compromised our judicial justice system is, that without without being able to corrupt a decision or be able to influence a decision in one way or the other, or if the judge has nothing to gain from you, then that decision may heavily go against you. I don't know.
Oh, wow. Okay, let's mull over that for a minute.
Be very sad in public environment, where if the pocket is empty, the judge is deaf. It means the judge may not listen to you, may not be listening if the pocket is empty. Brings out a bit of the challenges that we have in public finance in Africa and in the world largely sometimes. Yeah.
You need to have something in your pocket for you to have something of substance to share with anybody.
I mean, extend the meaning beyond just the traditional understanding of, say, the word judge. Somebody who has a jurisdiction and who can make decisions. Traditionally, chief, elders, parents. Okay, then bring it back now to modern times, and then make it global. The countries that are listened to the most and that have most clout.
What do they have?
Yeah.
Their pockets are not empty.
Indeed.
True. It speaks also of development.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, like when they were doing the mapping out of Kenya, when the whites were doing that, the pre-colonial period, the places where we have roads and those roads are being serviced, the places where we have railway and those railways are being maintained, it is because they have something. Yeah. Ukambani, they have no roads because they have nothing.
No.
It is true.
He makes an extremely valid point, because if you look at the politics of this country and why it's so important who is in that seat of the president and how close people are, because our association and correlation between development and political leadership is direct.
Exactly.
There's no two ways about it, and it's not a theory, it's our lived experience.
Yeah. Could it be also coming from the homes we are brought up, whereby in our families during Christmas, when the mother or the father is addressing the children, the one who is a bit 12 actually gets recognition more than even when he's not the firstborn.
Yes.
So
This is true.
Yes, you find if you don't much, even if you are the firstborn, the family does not really pay too much attention on you. They quickly listen to you and move on. And let's see John.
Or if you show up in the village,
And you
you show up in the village with a very big car this Christmas.
Good. Everybody in the village will pay attention to you.
Is it sustainable? That's the question. Sustainable public finance is what we're talking about this hour. So I guess it's a great place to jump into the conversation this morning. We use this phrase almost like a buzzword now. Sustainable public finance. Can we just start off with, okay, what is that in the first place? Public finance on its own. Before we even talk about it being sustainable, let's start off with you, Joshua. What exactly is public finance?
Speaking from a point of a political economist and also a practitioner, is that public finance, we are speaking about the how we allocate resources and how we protect the provisions of human rights as per the Article 43 of the Constitution. How the design of our Constitution is that we start with the human rights, we understand them. Also, then we go to chapter 6 where we talk about how we elect ethical leaders who can now allocate chapter 12 in a sense that it upholds and protects the human rights. So when you're speaking about a sustainable public finance is a system whereby we are able to allocate resources and being able to sufficiently protect and cover for the human rights, and at the same time being able to meet our development needs. And that speaks to how we do our budgets, that speaks to how we do our borrowings, that speaks to how we raise our revenues. When we raise revenue, is it just? Is it accountable? Does it follow the rule of law? When you do our budgets, are we human rights focused or are we business focused in terms of how we do our budgets? Because that informs how we borrow, that informs how we conceive the projects, and that is a pathway towards which we are working towards a sustainable public finance management system in Kenya. Yeah.
So when we say it's sustainable, taking all of these things into consideration, Samuel, and to say that, okay, public finance is something that every economy on the globe, so long as you're operating within the jurisdiction of a nation state, public finance is something that's going to come into play, right? In order for it to be sustainable, you're taking in rights of the citizenry and you're taking in responsibility, proper fiscal responsibility. How can you make sure that now those elements are sustainable over time? How would you be able to look at an economy, for example, and say that their public finance operations are actually sustainable?
Okay. There are largely three types of finance. There is a personal finance, there is a corporate finance, which is like for companies, and the public finance, which is what runs nations. Now, the two are very similar aspects. Now, let me start with the personal finance so that we can borrow that to public. Personal finance requires that when you earn your salary, you make a budget for it and do what will take yourself and your family to the next level of development. Okay? That means you are investing in the best projects for the family if it's a business you're starting. Now, there are other people who may take their salary. Now it's Christmas, you take the whole family to Mombasa for holiday. Then come January, you have no school fees. And you're saying the economy is bad, yet you spend the money. Somebody else will take a loan or a debt. Start a business. And in 2 years or so, the family is stable. Now, let's apply those principles to public finance. In the entire PFM cycle, from planning to reporting, all those aspects are there within the PFM cycle. They must be done sustainably, in an effective and in an efficient way. Where are we applying our resources to the most productive projects in the country? When we take public debt, where are we are we putting it in social programs? Are we putting in capital project, or are we using it for recurrent expenditure? So sustainable public finance is whereby resources are spent in the most frugal manner. Frugal manner is we are careful to use it as intended. If, for example, it's like the PFM Act says we use debt for development. That means it to be able to yield more jobs, open more factories, where we can absorb more people. But if we use it, for example, consume it on recurrent, or invest it in heavy projects that do not redirect to the common mwananchi. For example, we can get funds and begin designing our exploration of the moon. Sounds nice.
Sure.
But how is that sustainable to a small economy like ours, or to the common mwananchi? So sustainable PFM is where resources are applied in the most frugal manner, in the most in the best way and most effective and efficient way that benefits the common mwananchi.
How exactly does this knowledge then move from the experts like yourselves to those who make our laws, like our parliamentarians, and those who also implement it? What's our process?
And how do we equally just ensure that that information gets to them and that they're able to appropriate these funds in the right way?
Okay, let me start with the last question. How do we make sure that this technical knowledge moves from the experts to the decision makers? Okay. One, the experts must also be invited in those spaces where they can give their opinion. That's why I think our designers of our laws and a very big component on public participation. Okay, because then the experts should also have a chance to hear their views, and that the decision makers, the parliament who allocate these resources, are able to listen to them and also put that what they have had into actual action.
Why must they be invited?
Invited means an environment for somebody to listen to you. It can be an open space, or creating an environment for you to be listened. Why it's important is because for somebody to take your ideas, they must first of all accept you.
Okay. Let me give it a perspective.
Okay.
People, individuals who have your training and your expertise, which ministry would one find them? Where would we find you?
You find me in the National Treasury.
They are the government advisors.
They're government advisors.
And also, I think if you're speaking honestly in terms of Kenyan governance space, we're speaking of invited space and also the invented spaces. This is more on paper, but if you put it into perspective of what we have in Kenya, we can't say that we don't have sufficient experts who can give government solid advice. We can't say that government has not recruited adequate advisors, even with this regime the way it is. But the question is, where do we beat the bush? Where does the government fail to get it right? Because as we are speaking about public finance, as we speak about raising public revenue, one thing of the focus is that any project that is being conceived by government has to be first assessed based on the human rights perspective. Is it going to promote education? Is it going to promote healthcare? Is it going to promote water, health, and sanitation? But the problem is that we always have political conflict with that. And most of the time, a sound decision or a sound political advice, a sound economic advice may not be sufficient to influence a decision in Kenya, or to influence a borrowing, or to influence a budget. We are speaking in a situation whereby we have an auditor general, a controller of budget, people who constantly appraise the government on quarterly basis on what projects are performing, on how the county governments are performing, on what ministries are doing with the money. But at the same time, we find the members of parliament continuously allocating and approving budgets and approving borrowings that are clearly blind of what the Auditor General is saying and what the Controller of Budget is saying. Auditor General and the Controller of Budget are supposed to be the officers of the parliament. As it is structured right now, these two officers, they do not really take that central position of parliament. Their work is to advise parliament to make sound decision in terms of approving borrowings, in terms of approving the budgets and any revenue raising measures. But at the moment is that, and also speaking towards their role is that when they generate reports, they first table it in the parliament before they table it in the state house, before it is accessed by anyone else. Meaning that their central role is to advise parliament, and the members of parliament are supposed to use these documents to appraise the national government in terms of how they're performing, and also in terms of if they have approval to borrow, if they have approval to raise a budget, or they have approval to do any revenue raising. So it is, yes, we cannot say that this expertise or these people, they are not in the government spaces. They are there, but we have to find out how do we have so good employees, very qualified people in government, and yet we cannot get it right in terms of public finance management in Kenya.
So long as we have a situation where the experts exist and the environment or the places where this expertise can be implemented exists, and yet we don't see it, then it becomes theoretical.
Yeah, absolutely.
True. And it's actually of very little use to the citizenry. And yet, in its theory, it's actually very good.
Yeah. True. I would also want to say the citizenry also needs to begin getting involved to a large extent. How the citizenry needs to be involved. One, this concept of public participation needs to be real. I have been in some places in this country where that actually, I've been to projects where the community sets up a team to monitor a project. Okay. Say is drilling of a well. They have a chairman, they have a committee that sits to appraise the project. They are monitoring how the contractor is moving, and they even approve that he should now be paid.
Samuel, but as you talk about matters to do with public participation, in Kenya as we speak right now, public participation is considered to be just that on paper. We don't have that which you consider to be meaningful public participation, because even the constitution itself is not clear on what public participation is. I could call 10 people in a room and call that public participation. So in terms of having meaningful public participation on matters to do with public finance, do we have that? If not, how do we change that?
Yes, it has not been very effective. I know guidelines of many categories are being developed, but public participation needs to be meaningful. One, for it to be meaningful, the citizens must have interest in their public management of their public affairs. Two, they are to be knowledgeable citizens, so that you're even able to picture what is 1 billion shillings. A good number of our public cannot actually picture what's 1 million shillings, let alone 1 billion. So when you are told a road costed 1 billion shillings, do you have the mental capability to picture what is 1 billion? Okay, so the citizen must come for those public participation, not say for lunch, not for coffee, but realizing that the public expenditure, PFM, affects everybody. And however rich you may be, you cannot solve public challenges with your individual resources. Because you will put a perimeter wall, you will have a very nice gate, but if there is a thug, he will wait for you as you open the gate. But if we had a working public sector space, that robber will be protected from a distance.
Right.
So the citizens must be intentional and be involved in their management of public resources, right from elections. Check who do you put in that space. Not necessarily the person who added you a packet of Muga, though you needed it, but you know very well that if you take the Muga, what does it mean after that? So the citizen need to be informed. They need to be involved. They need to hold their leaders to be accountable. And it's really taking shape.
Okay. I think I would like to add a little bit on that. When you're talking about citizen participation in governance, this is in one way or the other, citizens are fulfilling their part of mandate of the social contract, where they form a government, and then the government has to deliver, and then they have to pay taxes in terms of facilitating the government to deliver. But at the same time, we having a governance structure or a public that, perceives that, I can elect a corrupt leader and demand that this leader will be, this leader will deliver, based and respect the human rights, and be able to benefit from this government in one way or the other. It's a conflict. The citizens have to understand, we heard the Gen Z protests, which are good. We are having a very heated conversation at the moment when government wants to raise revenue, when the government wants to raise taxes. But then at the same time, this conversation needs to be as heated when it comes to electioneering on how ethical is this public servant that you're putting in office, all right? How has he demonstrated his capability of being a good steward of the public resources? Because the reason as to why we have a chapter on ethics and integrity on chapter 6 of the Constitution is so that the citizens can be able to carefully put in place people that are able to be good stewards of chapter 12. I don't see I don't see if it is possible that we can elect someone who has blatantly defied every bit of or every aspect of chapter 6 of the Constitution, and then we expect so much of him to come and allocate proper resources in chapter 12.
Right.
All this, you have to, it's a journey that we have to walk through in our Constitution. And the people who framed that Constitution, they were very careful that all the process goes to the Parliament. If we elect ethical members of Parliament will allocate resources ethically. They will appropriate chapter 12 of the Constitution ethically. But at the moment, if we have a member of Parliament that is compromised, a member of Parliament that is accused of corruption, we have leaders who are holding high public offices accused of corruption, and at the same time these corruption cases are being dropped because of pressure from high above. We are having a mismatch, and until we get it right at that level, we are going to still struggle with allocation of with the appropriation of chapter 12 of our Constitution.
We're having a sustainable public finance conversation this morning. How do you allocate finances to certain things? How do you keep the rights of citizens atop? And how do you make sure you're not getting into irresponsible debt? Samuel Kiautha is a public finance management expert, joined by Joshua Muteti, who's a political economist and faith leader. That's the conversation that we're having this morning. Our sustainable public finance conversation continues this morning. Samuel Kiautha is a public finance management expert, joined with Joseph Muteti, political economist. Joshua Muteti, political economist and faith leader. CT, your hot potato question before we went to break.
No, it isn't a hot potato question. It's actually a very simple question. Because when we have conversations here, the matter about the issue around ethical and people who are fit for purpose and who abide by the law always comes up, but do they actually exist?
Come again, I didn't hear that. The people?
Do people who are ethical exist? These people who, if
they
elected,
do exist.
Where do you find them?
They are ethical people.
Because the question is, where are we? Why is it that we haven't found them yet? Because if we keep talking about them, then clearly we haven't found them. Because if we had found them, our conversation would be different. Where are they?
I would say they are ethical people. What I think we need to do, we need to recalibrate the entire society right from very young, so that ethics and doing good becomes part of our systems right from the word go. I don't know how we are going to do that, but it needs to start from maybe education right from very young age. For instance, when you said a kid and do tell them, bring this, then I'll buy you a sweet. You say, for example, bring me firewood, and then I will buy you bread. What ethics are we teaching the kid, that for you to obey the parent or to do homework, then I need to buy you? Is it a motivation or is it a bribe? Okay, it's a question. So right from the word, we need to calibrate the whole society so that good is seen positive. For instance, Avin Kenyans say, you see an average living civil servant, retired civil servant, people say, huyu naye alikuwa very senior kwa serikali, and he is here very broke. Or also when they see, you see already, what are we telling the other people? That when you're very senior, you should not get broke, or at some point.
To my point exactly, so they don't exist. So I mean,
No. I think, do we say they exist? Do we say they do not exist? And the question is about, I think the question is about resilience. Because even among the angels, we had some sort of a rebellion. But what saved heaven is that the resilience in heaven was higher. When we're speaking about an ethical place or an ethical form of governance, we are speaking about the ability of people being compatible with the ethical systems that are there. And then above that are the laws. Is Chapter 6 enforceable in Kenya? And to what extent is it enforceable? Because at the moment we are having political persecutions disguised as implementation of Chapter 6 of the Constitution. And then at the same time, when another guard takes place, another political persecution. So yes, I would say...
Political persecution, I don't understand. What do you mean?
What I mean is that we are having, if you look, from the previous regime and the current regime that we have, when this current regime got into power, most of the corruption accused cases, tuned to around 11 point something billion, were dropped. Why were these dropped? All right. Would they say that the facts were not quantified? Were the facts not right and all that? So yes, you're speaking about, can we find ethical people? But then at the same time, is our Chapter 6 enforceable enough? Can someone who offends ASECA, someone who offends Pokamla, someone who affects the Bribery Act, can these people be prosecuted and jailed and pay the price of being corrupt? Because what I'm looking here is a question of resilience. Is our systems strong enough? Is our system able to sustain, if I decide like not to be corrupt in like, let's say in a ministry, or let's say I'm a member of parliament, I don't want to be corrupt, is the system stable enough to protect me? Or
what do you think? Is it strong enough?
I think we are getting there. We cannot say we are too weak, but I think
and when you say system, what exactly are you referring to?
I'm referring to the laws, policy, legal, and institutional frameworks. Yes, we have them. But then, to what extent, in terms of implementation or in terms of enforcement?
What determines the efficacy of the law? Is it the law itself, or the applicability, or the individuals who are set or are given the mandate to actually enforce it?
Or do all those things come together in concert?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah. But that's how that's the lifespan of a law. You create a law, and then it has people get to know about the law, and then you enforce the law. But then at the moment we're speaking about the compatibility of this law with how Kenyans have been groomed, and going back to the point of Samuel, that we have laws that they seem to be an aspiration, what we ought to be.
All laws are aspirational.
Yeah.
All.
Yeah. They are
all.
They are aspirational.
Yes.
But they should not be aspirational.
Can you say that you're heading towards a place that's responsible if something very simple, for example, the debt ceiling in the country, because we're talking about sustainable public finance.
Yeah.
We're talking about a legislative body whose responsibility it is to ensure that some things don't go off track. But we have not once, not twice, not even thrice crushed the debt ceiling, which is mandated by law that you should not cross.
Yes.
How can you say that we are getting there when the very thing that essentially puts money into the economy says you should not go beyond this amount because it will not be sustainable?
Absolutely.
But the body that is tasked with the responsibility of making sure that threshold is not crossed gives you permission to cross it every single time.
Yeah.
How can we say we're getting there?
I think also as you respond to that, there is also the fact that we know that Chapter 6 of the Constitution that we have discussed here has continuously over time been watered down by this very same body that should be able to appropriate these funds and not hit those ceilings that we're talking about. So in terms of just making sure that everything is sustainable, that the law is followed, how are we getting it?
I'll speak a little bit and then Samuel can react to it as well. The conversation about debt ceiling, raising debt ceiling, and borrowing that is not sustainable. Debts are not anchored on human rights terms. Debts are anchored on business terms. And that's why the president is always worried when we are getting to a place where we are thinking about of a default. Because you cannot fail on business terms. If you fail on business terms, the creditor will come onto your door to ask for the money. And that is the problem with our public debt. That is the problem with what we owe in Africa, is that even the projects that we conceive, they are carefully designed in our budget so that they can demonstrate a need that we don't have. So that we can justify a borrowing that we don't need in a country or we don't need in a particular year. And this is because the conversation of human rights is not central in budget formulation, in borrowings and all that. Nobody cares about what does unsustainable borrowing does to the allocation of funds to healthcare, to the allocation of funds to education and all that.
What we're doing here is what we Kenyans are very good at. We are looking at an issue and we are giving it some very serious academic intrusion. We are looking at it and breaking it down, and everything we're saying makes perfect sense. So long as it stays a discussion, it makes perfect sense.
In reality,
yes, because what you say, and this is what I began with, you make sense. What you say makes sense. We understand it is good. And then you brought in the people who are supposed to be ethical. And my question is, no, sort of way I'm making that, they don't exist. This is my point. Because if they existed, then the very things we're saying would not be where they are. We would be talking, the discussion would be different. But it isn't.
I would actually say ethical people exist. I have met some genuine...
Where do they exist?
I have met some genuine civil servants. I've met some genuine Christians, some genuine Muslims. What I would say sometimes challenges us is the what we call the system sometimes may not enable you to be ethical. Let me give an example. If for example, you are on the roadside and every matatu is greeting the policeman good morning as they pass, and your matatu is the only one that is not greeting, you may have a challenge operating that route, so consequently you close down. Okay, so even the good person who was ethical, the system beats him down. But where in microsystem,
must the business you do be a matatu business?
No, it's an example. That's an example. That could be even operating a bar, operating a shop. So what I was trying to say, we have to create a moral system with time or with a bit of maybe what I call calibrating from a very young age, whereby the good people in the society are celebrated at one point and highlighted. Yes, they are good people.
Actually, this is where now I have to ask you to give me the permission to disagree with you.
It's okay.
You see, there is nothing like recalibrating the society. This society is already calibrated. The processes that we're talking about, everything we're talking about is now here. Yes, there are very many honest people who work within government. If they didn't exist, actually, the system would have collapsed.
Exactly.
It's not. Now, the public who are not in government are a majority. The understanding and the need to hold leaders to account is something we are unwilling to do. And so long as we're unwilling to do it, we should stop complaining. We know what is wrong. The very thing you say, upholding and celebrating people who do good, we don't do that. We do the complete opposite.
Exactly.
We know full well that this 30-year-old left college the other day. We know full well. We know full well that this 30-year-old doesn't have a business you can even point to. And yet they are absolutely liquid. It's not difficult to understand it. we celebrate these people. So when we talk about the problem isn't the system, the problem is us.
Agreed. We are the system in a way. The system I'm
But
talking
there is
about
no
is
system
us.
without us.
Yeah, and I
You see,
agree
like
with
my
you.
brother
then.
here was talking about a region we refer to as Ukambani. One of the things that plagues places in this country, not just Ukambani, when you find problems that are perennial, there are leaders that they've had there that, for the best way of describing it, they're utterly useless to that particular community. There's nothing they do that serves the interest of that community. It doesn't matter what position you give them,
Yes.
that community will continue to languish in poverty.
Yeah.
But why can't that community bring itself to bring a different set of leadership?
My point is not the leadership. It is
us.
holding people to account.
Yes.
So what we are saying essentially,
Yes.
and if we can maybe just all chime into that, is that there is going to be, whether we like it or not, in leadership, in governance, there will be an element of, I'm playing it down seriously. Is there going to be an element of bad manners? But it is up to the folks who are in the gallery to either clap or boo them off stage.
Thank you.
To say, hey, this is not working. And it doesn't mean that you have to have a degree in finance for you to understand that it is clear that 1 million shillings was given for this thing is not 1 million shillings. And to be able to say, hold on a minute, no, we are going to say no. You don't have to have that in-depth academic understanding of certain things for you to be able to look at something and say it is wrong, or for you to be able to have that, je ne sais quoi, to say there is a problem here and we've put you in this position to ensure that such problems do not occur. And we're not going to keep quiet looking at this problem occur every single day. Is that not what we are saying? That everybody has a responsibility then when it comes to sustainable public finance management.
Yes.
Exactly, that's what we are saying. The public in our churches, in our mosques, in our temples, in our homes, we need now to sensitize our people, like you have said, to boo the wrong things and celebrate the good. And also, when given a choice of somebody you know they are ethically correct and one who is not ethically correct, you must be to make that conscious choice of this is the person we should have in that position.
There's something called a truth decay. I talked about it earlier this morning. When we are unwilling to accept and recognize the truth for what it is, and we prefer to reshape it and retool it to suit our purposes, there's a decay in that process. And unfortunately, when it becomes the norm, it eats you into your very soul. So you actually find you have a decayed truth process in this country. So nobody really wants, they actually do not want to deal with the truth directly. They don't. And whenever you present it, it is not, in fact, people can get violent on you for simply saying what is actually patently obvious and true.
True.
But I think if we've been paying close attention to what is happening in Kenya, at the moment we are having citizenry that is getting more aware. We are having citizenry that is taking up arms and questioning every government move. And I think despite the fact that we've had a precedence of bad governance and a precedence of, let's say, citizens, they don't care what is happening, whether government does allocate public finance well or not, they don't care. In civil society, we've been pushing for citizens to look at the finance bill. I got in this space somewhere in 2019. Nobody was bothering. But all of a sudden, 2023, 2024, citizens are more aware. Citizens want to look at the finance bill. Citizens want to reject finance bill. And this gives us a little bit of hope. And I think also the church leaders, they're getting into the space because they're saying, yes, at least we got these people into power on a promise of this and this and that. But also at the same time, they're coming back to check in terms of delivery, in terms of governance. So I think even the church leaders, they're getting to be more aware. They're getting to sensitize their members so that they can be able to hold these leaders accountable in terms of allocating of resources. Because it's all politics. Allocation, the basic definition of politics. And who gets what, when, and how, it depends on how much public can be able to apply the ethical pressure.
You're both finance people, you understand economics.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's a term called odious debt.
Yes.
When my sister here talked about the borrowing, money that is supposed to be borrowed on our behalf never really seems to get anywhere. We have a legal requirement not to pay for something that did not benefit us and which we did not approve.
odious debt.
Yes.
Now, odious debt is illegal debt.
Yes, it is.
And how do you define the illegality? Was it picked by the people in office?
Oh, no, it's
Or
very
the
simple.
official documents?
What is it that our laws says we borrow for? It's not really complicated.
It's the PFM is clear. We are supposed to borrow for development.
Exactly.
Yes.
So when you look at what we've borrowed, the trillions we've borrowed, can we say that each and every cent that we borrowed has ended up in development? And if we can prove that it didn't end up in development, why on earth are we paying for it?
And I think as well as we talk about, as City raises that, we live in a country where even the constitution says monies that should go to the counties should be a certain percentage of the last audited accounts. When were accounts last audited?
Such questions.
I would say Auditor General has been improving on these timings and
Her timings.
on her timings.
Yes.
The issue is, I've read some of those reports. Some of the information that those reports we don't even as a society digest it. For example, you read we were looking at the control budget report the other day, and one of the issues was 641 million was paid for commitment fee on a loan that we had not utilized. Now, I'm just trying to say that even when those institutions do their work, are those reports getting used for the purposes they were meant to? And by both the society and those in decision making, or are they just ignored?
Indeed. And those are questions that we can leave up in the open that would need to continue being discussed. And I want to thank both of you for being here this morning to at least raise that in our minds once again, that we can't just leave it to folks who may be doing whatever it is that they've been put down on a contract for, but we have to ask the questions. Samuel Kiautha is a public finance management expert. Joshua Muteti, political economist and faith leader, have been our guests this hour. Thank you very much for being in the hot seats of the Situation Room. We'll continue the conversations.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.